Deb Frecklington, thank you so much indeed for your time. Now, Adani has spent 8 years trying to get the approvals for its mine. Now, Premier Palaszczuk says her Coordinator General and the Environment Department are going to meet tomorrow to come up finally with a time frame to resolve this. That's got to be a good move, doesn't it?
Well, look, this is a Premier that is so out of touch. I mean, it is clear that what she's done today is just weak leadership and she's incapable of making any decisions. Look, people are sick to death of a Premier that blames everyone else. We've got her government is in crisis, her MPs are revolting, or her MPs are in revolt at the moment, and it's clear she can't make a decision. So the big decision Anastasia Palaszczuk, the Premier of Queensland, made today was that she was going to have a meeting. Now, I think that just is a real slap in the face to all the Queenslanders who have been screaming out for jobs in rural Queensland.
But surely this seems to be an indication that the Labor Party's come to its senses to some extent and the mine must now go ahead.
Well, look, let's hope so. And the fact that Anastasia Palaszczuk has stood up today and tried to say that well, she's going to get the Coordinator General involved, well, it really shows how we have a Premier that runs a state that really doesn't even understand the process. I mean, this is all about politics for the Premier. Look, the Coordinator General has been involved in this process since 2010. Back in May 2014, this same Coordinator General, gave the environmental impact statement, the tick-off for the Adani project. So the only people that have stood in the way of this project getting going has been the Premier herself and her ministers, who are really obviously anti-jobs in the region. So, look, let's hope it's a step forward because I know that, when I was in Townsville yesterday, I'm on my way up to Mackay, look, people are screaming out for the jobs. They want this project to get going, and as they rightly should. I mean, this is a project who has done everything it can over the last 8 years to get the final tick-off, and now we've got the Palaszczuk government using political interference, and, it's death by 1,000 cuts for this project, it appears.
Well, we've had a lot of journalists and Greens and protesters say, well, look, the Adani mine isn't that important. The job benefit is overstated, etc., etc. How important is it really that it go ahead?
Well, look, this project is vitally important. We have one of the worst unemployment rates in the nation. And when you head to towns like Rocky and Mackay and Clermont, I mean, Townsville even, they are screaming out for the jobs. So this isn't only for the jobs. It is also the issue that we are really concerned about in Queensland is the message this is sending to the investment community. We need to remember that Queensland is a resources state. We're very proud of our resources. We're proud of our agriculture and tourism. But the message this government is sending to the worldwide investment community is that we're closed for businesses, and if you do want to put a business here, we'll move the goalposts. And I think it's a terrible message that the Premier is sending to anyone that wants to invest in Queensland. But what we need to see is that this project go ahead for the future of jobs in not only Central and North Queensland, but all over Queensland for that matter, because so many other projects come off the back of it.
How important do you think the stalling by Labor federally and state on Adani was to the election result on Saturday?
Well, look, I think, Andrew, the election result on Saturday certainly sent a very clear message to not only the Palaszczuk government, but governments around this country, is that when you stop listening to them, then they will really show you at the ballot box. But what we do see here is we need to have this project just given a fair go. The Premier needs to actually make a decision for once in a life, get going and stop blaming someone else, or stop saying it's an independent regulator now to make a decision. The independent regulator that she's talking about is her own Environment Department.
Well, about the Queensland Environment Department, the fact is that the government has been hiring green activists into that, such as Tim Seelig, the anti-coal campaigner who used to lead the Queensland Conservation Council. It seems to me that that's stacking the decks. Are you going to get rid of people like Seelig if you win next year's Queensland election?
Well, look, in relation to that appointment of Tim Seelig, that is just shocking political interference. There's no other way to look at it. I mean, this is a bloke who actively campaigns against the Adani project. He's an active Greens campaigner, and he has now been instilled as one of the senior policy advisors, strategic policy advisors in the Department of Environment. This is shocking and blatant political interference. We also need to remember that Tim Seelig put his application in for this job after applications had closed. He jumped over about 50 other qualified people for this position and then got put straight in to the Environment Department. So if Anastasia Palaszczuk wants to say that she's, upfront with Queenslanders, well, she needs to be upfront about the people that she's putting into those Environment Departments to stop jobs in the regions. It's shocking, and it's blatant political interference into a process.
There is a lot of global warming hysteria around, and that's obviously spooked, the banks when it came to lending to Adani. It spooked Labor politicians, and including some Liberal ones as well. How do you think, speaking more broadly, politicians should be dealing with this? I mean, what are the lessons from the election result that maybe you've been too easily convinced that activists represent the public?
Well, I think if there's any lesson to be learned out of the federal election on Saturday is that we actually have to get back to basics, and we've got to listen to the people on the ground. Look, Queensland is such a big state, but I can tell you people just want jobs, they want governments to get out of their way, and they're sick to death of activists telling us what we're meant to know. Now, it is pretty clear when Bob Brown brought up his convoy up into Clermont that the people around there just went, go back down south. We don't need to hear from you. So I think for a lot of these bigger issues that activists decide that they want to come in and they want to tell us what we should know or how we should think, well, I think the people of, or everyday people, but particularly people in Queensland, they actually know what they're thinking, and we don't like to be taken for granted. But again, I think we need to look at our policy decision making and our policy planning process through the eyes of the actual voters. Yes, we need to look after the environment. Yes, we need to make sure we're making, good financial decisions for the people of Queensland. But the number one thing we should be listening to is actually the voter, and that is the people that wake up each and every day concerned about how the hell they're going to pay their bills. And I know one of the biggest problems with regional Queensland is that they're feeling completely strangled by the government here in Queensland, and it goes back to the policies that the Palaszczuk government have got in place. They're anti-jobs, they're anti-resources, and they're anti the regions.
Well, how about if you do become Premier next year, how about making sure that schools teach both sides of the global warming debate? That would be a start, wouldn't it?
Well, look, I think that'd be a really good start. I've got 3 teenage daughters, Andrew, and I can tell you right now, some of the stories they come home from school and now university with my eldest one, and some of the stories they come out of, school with is really quite shocking. And I think we need to ensure that both sides of the debate is debated. I mean, this is exactly what the reason why I'm so pleased that there has been a convincing result to the coalition federally on the weekend, because it actually shows that people are standing up for their own rights and actually looking to the other side of the debate. We're not being brainwashed by the big spending and the activist campaigns.
Well, Deb Frecklington, thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thank you very much, Andrew.